Hello and welcome to Radio Somanaut. I'm your host, Whitney Pyles, and in each episode, I'll be interviewing inspiring and innovative individuals who are impacting the world through somatics, using the modality we call body-oriented coaching. Each one of my guests is a Somanaut. That means they're a graduate of the Somatic School, an online educator that trains coaches to be stewards of the body's wisdom. We'll be hearing their stories and getting particularly curious about how they're carrying this impactful work into their lives and communities. So in the spirit of the Somatic School, my invitation to you is to embrace ease, take a breath in, and allow their words to be a welcome exhale. Hello and welcome to Radio Somanaut. My name is Whitney Pyles, and I am here with Nicky Moran. She's been a coach and trainer for 20 years, and her mission is to ignite creativity in the world, helping people express their unique brilliance. She helps creatives become more business savvy and businesses to become more creative. At the core of her work lies authentic personal branding, where Nicky guides individuals towards getting clarity on what makes them brilliant, unique, and captivating. She then helps them tell their story by becoming a compelling speaker. She's coached hundreds of people around the world to do TED-style talks and helped many artists to elevate their careers to become known in their field for doing their soul work. She trained with the Somatic School in 2023 to help people become more comfortable being in the spotlight. Her background as a singer, performer, and radio journalist means that she brings a unique blend of skills from storytelling to stagecraft. And I am just loving just the vibrance and uniqueness of this bio. Even Nicky, I'd love to hear. Is there anything that you'd like to add just about yourself briefly?
Thank you, Whitney. And first of all, it's really interesting hearing back, what you stand for, because that's what I'm always trying to do with my clients, because it's a lot. Like, how do you fit like all of the things that you do into something that makes sense? And so it's quite nice to hear it played back, and it's like, yeah, that is what I do. Because sometimes when I trained with the Somatic School, it was certainly something that really was so life-changing. It made me think, oh, maybe I should now become just a somatic trainer. And what I realized is it absolutely uplifted everything I was doing already, but made me a bit sort of more grounded in the work that I was doing. So I think that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm working with creative people, artists, entrepreneurs, but also business people, who also want to know how to express and have a personal brand that helps them to go out and raise their profile in business and get known for doing the kind of work that they love doing. That's basically what I'm doing.
I love like this dynamic that I'm almost picturing as fractions on either side of I'm helping creatives become more business savvy and I'm helping businesses to become more creative, and kind of these flip sides of the coin, bridging that gap. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And let me give you a little bit more. So we're here because you've been a part of the Embodied Business Symposium. And that will have happened by the time this episode is released. So you will have just spoken at the Embodied Business Symposium. And there's something about that bit of your bio to me that really reflects like what it means to have an embodied business, that balance of business and creativity and play and structure that I'm really feeling like is echoed in the work that you do. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that and what it means to you to have an embodied business and to maintain that balance.
Well, I think for me, that was the turning point when I trained with the Somatic School. Before that, I'd been a coach and a trainer for many, many years already, and I had a successful business. I was blogging, I was running a community, I was doing lots of different workshops in the business world, but I was absolutely frantic and stressed all the time, but probably didn't know I was. And I think I'm like many people who sort of go out on their own to carve their own path. So many coaches, are doing work they're really passionate about, as are many creative people. But it's very, very easy to lose sight of, your personal guidance system or your reason for doing it, because you're so looking outwards trying to get clients. And business is full of people who feel so much stress. And I think when I did the Somatic course, it was actually just after lockdown,
Mm.
and I think I hit a wall in lockdown. I'd been running training courses. I'd been effectively just getting exhausted, doing too much as running my own business. And I really just stopped for a while and retrained in some somatic coaching at the Somatic school. And it was like a completely different world. So suddenly it was like realizing I have a body, I have breath, I have the choice to not be constantly stressed. I can pause, I can relax, and I can. It was almost like going into a different room. So before, the room felt very tiny, and I was pushing myself, and then suddenly I felt like everything expanded. And for me, learning how to be home, how to be in my body, helped me just take the foot off the gas pedal and relax. And it was a bit confusing at the time, Whitney, I must admit. When I first trained, I almost thought, I don't know whether I want to do my business anymore. Maybe I just want to, go and travel and, do all the things that I long to do. So for a while, I really slowed down, and I took some time out just to reflect on what was important to me. What was really driving my need to constantly work. And why do all of us, push ourselves so hard? Why do we get into these states of mind where we become we're our own bosses, essentially? If you run your own business, you're the taskmaster. And I realized I was the worst boss to myself. I was just like, telling myself off, or just pushing constantly. So for me, becoming a more embodied business owner was about learning to rest in a much more balanced, relaxed way of being in the world, like really settling my nervous system, learning to be. So that's the first piece. And then it was trying to find a different source of motivation. And what I
Mm.
realized over time is I still care about the same things. I've always really cared about creativity, about helping the creative community be more empowered, and running businesses, being successful. I really deeply care about that. But I realized I needed to be a role model to be able to navigate your own life in a way that's sustainable. So that for me is the most important thing now. It's having a sustainable business where I don't get exhausted. I know how to
Mm.
help and get support. Yeah.
That's so, so resonant. Even before you said the word sustainable, as you were saying balance and some of these other things, that
Mhm.
word sustainable was coming up for me. So I love that that's been um, named. And you said a couple things in there that I'm really curious about. So after you went through the somatic school, there's this big question of, do I even want to continue doing this? And I really need to take some time to learn what's important to me and learn to be. And that really struck me, and it sparked some curiosity within me. So I'm wondering if you'll elaborate on that. What did you find was important to you as you came out of the somatic school?
Yeah, it's interesting because I took about a year to just do whatever felt good to me. So I was still getting clients, I was still doing all of my coaching and training, but I was just guided from a different place. So it was like, okay, I feel like at the time I was living in Brighton for a few months. So there were some days all I wanted to do was go up onto the terrace where I was living and look at the sea just for hours. And I'd just sit looking at the sea and think, this is good enough. This feels great. I realized spaciousness was so important to me and being in nature. And from giving myself space and time just to go for walks, to swim, just really being guided by my heart, my soul, I just learned how much creativity was bubbling up naturally, how I was inspired to write songs or I was inspired to dance, but giving myself space stopped me looking out there at what everybody else was doing and comparing myself. So I think that's the biggest danger when we're running a business. For me, when I first started as a coach and I needed to get clients, the first thing I did was looked at what everybody else was doing out there and thinking, oh, what's the right way of marketing myself? Looking for advice from the outside and going on courses and getting the tips and tricks and looking at everyone else. And I think in the sort of more spacious place of being connected with myself, it felt like a relief to go, actually, if I just come up with my own ideas, my own stories, be guided by my own intuition, I would imagine I will be much more compelling if I write a blog or I do a video. So it just felt easier. It felt a lot easier. And I just noticed I felt in flow. So when I would be called in to do some training, I didn't mask. I think in the past I probably would have got myself ready in terms of how can I go in and impress. How can I really impress people with my knowledge and my skills? And from that more relaxed, centered place, I would just meet people in a much more connected way. And everything felt better. Everything, like coaching conversations felt easier. Potential client conversations just felt so much more, I want to say the word blissful. Everything felt more blissful and easy. Yeah.
Oh, the language there. And I know that you're a writer, but just the language you've just used around blissful and feeling in flow. I'm really loving that. And there's something there. There's something there about it feels like instead of walking into a room or walking into a client conversation or into a meeting with this intention of impressing people with your knowledge and skills, instead it's just, and maybe impress is not the right word, but impressing them or impressing upon them just your presence and a different way of holding yourself in the world.
And interestingly, Whitney, I didn't even know I was doing that before. I had no idea. It was blind to me. I was just in a construct. I was just running my business in the way that I thought was the best way. But I'd learned pushing myself from a very early age. I don't think many of us do. We've got to push hard. And I think that was the message for many, many years. From the cultural context, you've got to go for your dreams, you've got to push, you've got to achieve, and learning to deconstruct that and just actually being aligned, being present, being in my body, and allowing things to evolve in the way that feels most natural. So I still have to make plans. To me, that was the sort of the balance you talked about before. Was I had to learn how to bring some of the strategic side that I did use before back and think, okay, I still got to have clear goals as a business person. It's not, things don't just evolve and happen. You still have to get clients. You still have to have a clear plan. So that's still there. Something is also really important. It's sort of the yin and the yang, isn't it, of running a business? But at the end of the day, our brands are us. Most of us, people are buying our presence. They're wanting to work with us because we make them feel a certain way. So the more I'm centered and connected to a sense of purpose and what's deeply important to me, the more resonance they'll feel when they're with me in my presence. So that was a massive realization. So thank you, Somatic School.
Yeah.
Changed so fundamentally in how I show up in the world.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to take some time with branding and storytelling in a moment, but you said something in there that I just want to call out because it feels really universal. Feels really universal in my experiences thus far, preparing for this podcast, talking to different Somanauts, and my experiences within myself, but
Yeah.
finding this balance of flow and unfolding and this natural evolution, that intelligent process, and balancing that with needing to be strategic and structured and getting clients and having a business and doing those things, that yin, that yang. um I'd love to hear more about what that looks like, right? What that looks like in your day to day as a business owner. How do you hold those both in the way you operate?
Well, Whitney, I have to work really hard at the planning side because it does not come easily to me. As a naturally really creative person, I can do all sorts of creative things, and that is something that is it just when I give myself space, I feel very, very free and expressive. But planning, I have to plan in the planning. That's the most important thing because if I don't. So, for example, how I have to do it is I have a weekly meeting with a mutual business owner, and we spend half an hour on a Monday morning, and we have connected time where we catch up, and then we sit together for half an hour and plan the week. So I plan the month and I plan the week and I set goals. But if I don't have that space, so what I find works really well is it's important to know the things you're not so great at as a business owner and find ways that are within your value set. So one of my values is connection with people. Find ways to do those things that don't come easily in a way that brings you some joy. So here I am on a Monday morning, like, oh, I've got a plan, but because I plan with one of my best friends, it's like really joyful. And when I've got, spent the time and done it, I feel great. And then it helps me be more creative because it's like I've got in the diary, right? I'm going to write 3 chapters of my book, blah blah blah, and then the mind works in the way that if it knows what to do, it you are more likely to get into a flow state when you have to do those things because you're not giving your mind so many different options. So that's what I have to do. And if I don't do it, Whitney, it's chaos.
Mhm.
But as well as that, I do get a lot of work. A lot of work comes in. So sometimes, last year, for example, I was in Dubai for a couple of weeks doing some training, and then I've done a lot of travel in my time. So sometimes I don't need to plan, and I just need to prioritize the work that's coming in. But I suppose being strategic is not just taking things that land on your lap. It's really about thinking what's important to me, and what do I need to prioritize time for. So one of the things I've been wanting to do for many, many years is actually write a book. And if I don't prioritize, like, that has been my goal this year. So I carved out August to prioritize that project. And if I hadn't done that, I would have been off on festivals or something like that. Wasn't that. So being strategic is like, who do I want to be? What's important to me to achieve? And really, really making time for those things.
Mm. Yeah. I'm in how you described how you feel after those Monday morning sessions. I
Yeah,
think that is such a beautiful illustration of where these places meet, where the business meets the creative,
yeah,
where the somatic meets the strategic. Is I'm doing this. I know this is hard for me. I know this is necessary for me. I know these are the banks of the river for me, so to speak. And so it's almost creating that time, right? That strategic planning, but then also as you're in it and as you're coming out of it, attuning to that feeling of, wow, I feel really good. And my
yeah,
energy understands where it wants
yeah.
to go. Mm.
Exactly. So if you have, so I think routines are really important. So this morning, I've booked in a friend of mine who's going to be helping me with my blogs going forward, because that is one of the things that drops to the bottom of my list, doing blogs. Because when I have a big creative project that I'm on, I can be very hyper focused and like, oh, the big project. So I think if you need to market yourself, you've also got to either have someone support you to make sure you make the time in the diary, or what I've done this morning is just booked in my website support, and we're just going to have a party every 2 weeks where I do my blog, but we do it together. So it's not so unbearable, because all of the tech side is not my strength, Whitney. I'm hopeless at it. So by getting support, even just a couple of hours every 2 weeks, yeah, I'm actually excited about doing it now. But in the old Nicky, the push through Nicky, would have just forced myself to do it and got so stressed and anxious and had a sleepless night and pushed through. And then it wouldn't make me want to do it the next time, because I'd have memories of that stressful experience. So for me, like running a business is about thinking really creatively. Like how can I make this more joyful? How can I have a, you know, when I do my accounts, I just give it to my accountants. Yeah, people are brilliant at doing things. Rather than pushing through, it's just not necessary. Yeah.
Mm. We're not making accounting a party, but I am hearing that we're making um the that's wonderful. So accounting, not a party, but making the planning and the working on the website something that you're doing in connection and leaning on another human, and it sounds like people that you like connecting with. And so almost hacking that, where you used to have that embodied memory of this being a stressful experience, just partnering it with connection and resonance with another human being as well.
Exactly. And that for me is what my brand is about. How can we all live more creatively? And it's not just about making art. It's not like, oh, I need to write a song, or I need to, you know, draw something to be creative. It's like, how can I unlock my own creative potential every single day? So today is like a creative unfolding. How can I make this day beautiful? You know, how can I be more original in how I tackle this problem? That for me is the beauty of coaching as well. Coaching is such a beautifully creative skill, and it's helping people open up to new possibilities.
Mm. Yeah, tell me more about that. Just coaching as opening us up to more possibilities, as being an opportunity to cultivate creativity.
I think that's exactly what coaching is, isn't it? It's like often people will come in, like people will come into the session with a I think I started talking about, it's like I'm in the corridor of how life should be, or like there's only this amount of options. And for me, coaching is like, okay, let's turn the corridor into a massive spacious room where we get to like relax and open up. Like it's
Mm.
just expanding the horizons. So I suppose thinking about me on that roof terrace looking at the sea, it's like taking people from being in a locked room to an open vista. That for me is a beautiful way of seeing coaching, because it's like it's helping us breathe again and see what's possible. Like life is a creative act. We can design it however we want it. But so many of us get clenched into thinking there's only one way. So I love
Mm.
that. And even creative.
I
Oh, sorry, I interrupted, Whitney.
No, continue with where you were going.
No, that's it. I mean,
Okay.
I find even creative people can get really locked in ways of working because I think the tension is about perfectionism and trying to get things right, and that can create such a grip on us. And I think when you loosen the grip and go, there ain't such thing as perfection, there's nothing needed out here but curiosity and fascination and what
Mm.
what what is possible. So it's living a life of possibility. For me, that's what great coaching is.
Mm. I could not agree more. And I just have to share with you that my little legs are just kicking underneath my desk right now, just hearing this, just seeing you open and describe this. And for anyone that's listening and not watching, um, as Nicky is describing the corridor, it's really bringing the fists towards the body and then that open vista being just this wide open chest, heart open, arms outstretched movement. And so, because this is a podcast by the Somatic School, I'm just going to pause and encourage our listeners to just move between constriction and spaciousness in your body and just notice what that feels like, because that's what Nicky's capturing and that's what I'm feeling just witnessing you and hearing you in this, Nicky. And it's just that openness, that spaciousness, that vastness, that vista, the image of the sea, um,
And
is
it's
just a
taken
really lovely one.
what would feel good.
Mm,
What do I desire from this incredible life of mine? What is possible?
mm.
What's possible today?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that and for that description of coaching. And like I said, I could not agree more, with just creative possibility and getting out of that corridor of how we're supposed to be showing up or what we're supposed to be doing with our life. And yeah, imagining creative possibilities that are unique to us. So thank you. And I'd love to, I've heard it and I want to hear more about the book that you're working on,
Yeah, the
if you're
book
okay
is.
sharing.
Yeah, no, I'd be delighted to share. So the book, the main idea in the book is I believe everybody is creative. So the book title potentially is called Naturally Born Creative because I think we were all born very creative. If you look at kids, there ain't no corridor there. Like kids are like vastly free. They're so expressive and unique and quirky, and they'll say the most bizarre things, and they're so fascinated, and they walk around expressing their bodies, falling over. There's no constriction as children. And I worked with children when I was studying performing arts. I did some acting work with children, and the younger children, I did storytelling workshops with them, and they were like so unbelievably bizarre and creative in how they saw the world. And what I noticed was kids, when they got older, from 11 upwards, really vastly became much more self-conscious and they were less creative. And I don't want to blame school for this, but I think the way education is designed is to help people to really develop their critical thinking skills, which is of course important. But I think what that does is it constrains people's ability to relax and take risks. And so the book is really, it's helping people to recognize their own creativity, that we are all creative. Everybody is creative, and to teach people permission to access more creativity in their lives. Because my belief is if everybody had more creativity in their lives, they would be so much happier. So I believe it solves things like mental health issues. It's embodied. A lot of creativity is embodied. Singing, dancing, making art is very embodied. It would help people to know themselves better, because creativity is often about expression, like what do I think, what do I feel. So it's taking people through a process to bring creativity back into their lives. So it's a philosophy, but it's also, it will be a course that will help people to come home to their creative selves again. So I'm really, really excited about it. And I know that there are books out there. There's The Artist's Way, which is very beautiful. That's a very, very beautiful process. And there's other, creativity books, but this will bring in the kind of the vast array of things that I've discovered during my own life. So I've always been interested in psychology and how people think and personality differences. So I think it's about finding a unique way to navigate a creative life on your own terms in a way that works for you. There's not one right way of doing that. Well, that's uncreative, isn't it? But
Yes.
here's what the book's about.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And dancing has been mentioned twice. So I'm going to ask this question. Just
Uh-huh.
waiting for the right moment for it. So you're between clients or you're between meetings
Mhm.
and you have space only for a one song dance party with yourself. What song do you play?
Oh God, Whitney, now you've got me. It might be a bit of bossa nova actually.
Mm.
It doesn't matter which track, but bossa nova for me is Brazilian music, and I'm a really big fan of Brazilian music because I've been and traveled around Brazil. I do Brazilian forró dancing here in London, and I just find it gets me into a state. Bossa nova is jazz and samba kind of merged together, so it's the best. It's very rhythmical, but it's very sexy. So I love
Yes.
a bit of bossa nova, and it really kind of loosens up my limbs, and it makes me feel really, really relaxed and free. So yeah, I'd probably go for any bossa nova song. Get it on.
Mm.
What would you choose, Whitney?
Oh, reflecting it back to me. What song would I choose? I don't want to missay this, but it is always for me. I'm going to have to just fact check myself here. It's the New Radicals. New Radicals, you get what you give. Don't care, you gotta get what you give. I don't know the lyrics at all, but for me,
I'm a favorite person too.
it's just it feels like this revolutionary, liberating song. And my work in the world, much of it is related to creative movement, intuitive movement, and freeform dance. And so I know for a fact it is the song that I have used more than any other song in the about 4 years that I've been doing that specific work. And it just inspires this little hop kick, this little hop kick motion that is energizing while also being regulating somehow. And yeah, it just brings the joy. So thank you for asking me that question back.
Put you in my book, Whitney. I think that's a very good song choice. I think you're right. Singing and music, music and dancing, they are just state changes straight away. It kind of helps you access your body, your aliveness. And, if we find music that speaks to us, it can really set the day off in a brilliant way. So it's definitely going to be one of my recommendations in my book is just use music to inspire you. In fact, just a very little story here. Music's really pertinent to me because my father was a bank manager, and he was the sort of man who was so tight and he's not alive anymore. So, but he was so rigid and such a workaholic. I know that I learned a lot of my traits through how he showed up in the world. So he would go to work, and every day he'd come home and he'd be tense, and then he'd go and sit in front of the television, watch the news, read the newspaper, and he was rigid. He was really, really tense, very, very, very tense about work. The one time I saw my dad relax was when he used to dance with my mum. So every now and again, they would put on some music and they would partner dance together. And I saw my father visibly relax and joy come into his face. And he was such a great mover. And he was like a different person in those moments. So it's very, very important to me to help people understand how important these simple tools are. Just listen to music and allow your body to express itself. If my dad did that when he went into the bank every morning, he probably would have come home a much more relaxed person. So yeah, and he died young. My dad got cancer. He died at the age of 62. And I can guarantee if he'd have allowed more creativity into his life and allowed himself to enjoy his music, because he was clearly very, very passionate and very musical and a really good dancer, I strongly believe that he would have lived a longer life and a much more healthier life. So just wanted to add that in.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I just want to call out that it's really sparked some emotion for me, and any rigidity that was left in my body, which is probably not much, feels like it's kind of melted off of my shoulders, and hearing that story. And it could be an ad for your work and for my work in the world, just the value of movement and creative expression and dance. And I just love imagining you witnessing this and seeing this whole different person, and really seeing him and the impact of that, and now sharing the importance of that with your community, with this community, with the world in general, through your work and through this book. So thank you for that.
You're so welcome, Whitney, because it kind of links in with the personal branding and the storytelling that I will be doing, with the community. Because where do brands come from? Brands are a philosophy. My personal brand is, my philosophy is, I think we should all have more creativity in the world. It's what I believe. In every great brand, what's makes a brand stand out is when that person who's expressing the brand has a really deep kind of belief in the world that they want to share. And where do you find that? You find that from stories. So I remember coming up with that story. I remember that story, and it made me go, that's why I do what I do. That's why I care about creativity. That's why I care about everybody doing something creative. It's because of my dad. One of the flames of ignition that made me really, really determined to get this work out there.
That is so special. And that segue is exactly the segue that I was really looking for. So tell me more about how you coach people around storytelling and brand.
Well, I mean, how I work with people is, most of the people that come to me either because they're at a crossroads. A lot of ambitious creatives I've worked with have made money, for example. They might have been in the game for quite a while, but they've got stuck. Because often when you go out there to make money from what you love doing, you can get known for the kind of work that you're good at. So, for example, I worked with one guy who came to me. He was an amazing musician, and he was doing library work, and he'd made a lot of money from it. But he was like me, very kind of pushed through person, kept chasing the money, and it was killing him. He was killing him because his soul was dying, because he wasn't listening to what his heart wanted to do. So the first thing that I do with those sorts of clients is really help them to get back to, who are you? Like, what is your deepest passion? What do you care more than anything? If we had another pandemic, or if you didn't need any more money, like, what would feel soulful for you to do with your life? So I start with that question and just get them back to connecting with what's deeply important to them. So that's part of that tribe. The other piece I do is getting people to share stories of what lights them up. And from there, I create like a beautiful tapestry, which creates a narration of what's amazing about them. So that might be their unique. So for example, there's a billion musicians out there. loads of musicians. How do you differentiate one musician to the next? And they all do the same thing. So the idea that I'm doing is I'm helping them craft and work out what's very unique about their style, about their personality. So, for example, I worked with one guy the other day, and he had this real ability to uplift a room. That was his brand, uplifting. So in a world where there's a lot of competition, and he, in the jazz world especially, there's a lot of machoism and people sort of like going in and everybody being virtuosos. And he's the one in the room who goes, it's like he holds the pace in the background. And that's what he discovered through our process. So it's really figuring out, because often people don't realize what they're brilliant at. And I see it very clearly in people, but teasing that out of them through helping them share stories of where they're really lit up, and like getting them to make the connection between, I thought that's just something I did, but helping them tell the story about that is very life-changing. So that's how I help people develop a brand. So I'm not, it's not about like designing the perfect website. It's really learning to tell a story about yourself that really shows the different facets of you. And I used to only work with creators, but now I love working with business people, because I find business people just as fascinating. So I worked with somebody who was in sales the other day, and like her unique skill, and the thing she loved more than anything was connections through food. She loved food. That's all she walked into my flat and she was like, "Oh, you've got those sorts of pans, have you?" And she was obsessed with it. And I was like, "That's your brand. That's what's so different and interesting about you." So she realized that's what she needed to carve out. She needed to work in the food industry. She needed a job where she could connect around food all day long. So she loved selling ideas. So we took her in that direction, and that was a great relief to her. She was like, oh right. She had no idea. So it's that's what I'm doing with clients, figuring out that jigsaw puzzle to me, and I love it. And I think because I've been doing it for so long, and I'm really fascinated by psychology, I seem to be able to sort of like, it's that. Like I'm kind of really good at helping piece it together for people. So that's it. That's where I start. And then from that, we kind of figure out, okay, so who needs that? Because you can't just go out there and say, oh, I'm good at this. You need to then, the next piece is figuring out who do you really love working with. So, when I figured out my own brand, you have to think where in the world needs what you have, and who do you love spending time with more than anything. So figuring out that piece as well, who are your right clients, where do you fit, who do you love being with, and who seems to resonate with you and needs what you have. So it's those pieces. And then later on, it's helping people learn how to be comfortable sharing information about themselves, because a lot of people really struggle to talk about themselves in a positive way, and they really undervalue themselves. So for me, the storytelling piece is the perfect method to help people to do that, because all you're doing is sharing what's true. You're not trying to sell or pressure people. You're just sharing, oh, this is true about me. A little story can share your background. It can, you might share a story about working with a similar client. You might share a story about, I've been through what you've been through, and this is how what I went through solved that. So it's storytelling is the perfect bridge. Storytelling is the best for marketing, Whitney.
Yeah, and it feels like there's something very, very just clean and simple and true about what you're sharing. And I'm really struck by this specific story about the guy you were working with, where his uplifting presence, that's what it is. It's his uplifting presence. And so how do we then get more creative around that? And how do we really dig into that And I'm really resonating with your putting the jigsaw puzzle pieces together. And I do feel like that's such a beautiful part of coaching too, and just being in process with these people to say it is that simple. And now how do we flow from that place and tell a story from that place and bring in that strategic mindset? Who am I talking to from that place of this is my essence, this is who I am, this is what it is about me.
I mean, the lovely thing about branding, Whitney, personal branding, is really being more of who you are, but like honing in on who am I? Like, who am I? What am I about? What's unique and interesting about me? And it gives you permission to be more of that. So I can tell you, when I first got into coaching and training, I was not as relaxed as I was these days, because I was always like trying to fit in into the world I was going into. I was always trying to be professional. And what that does, it creates a barrier between you and the client, because there's a sort of wall of I need to be appropriate, I need to impress, or I need to act a certain way. So having a personal brand allows you to just be more of you. So like for me in the corporate world, another little story, Whitney, when I first became a trainer, I was terrified of people thinking I was an imposter and I shouldn't be there. So I used to put a suit on and I would really kind of rock up, and I try to act in a way that I thought people wanted me to act, because I've done training in banks and, all sorts of very corporate worlds I've inhabited. And I used to go in and really try and replicate the people that I was working with. And it was exhausting. So for me, a brand can, even if you go and do work in the corporate world, they love it when you can go in there and relax and just bring your true self, your true voice. So I go into the corporate world and I do leadership trainings and I let people know, I'm a singer and I have a background in acting and dance, and they're more intrigued by me. But what I do is I tell a story of how that's really relevant to leadership. So I'll link it to their world. So it's not like I'm over here, being my personal brand as an island. I'm kind of building over there to relate it to the world they're inhabiting, and how what I've learned is incredibly useful to them. And I'm really curious about who they are as well. But I've created a bridge. I'm no longer an island trying to protect myself and trying to, be who they want me to be. And when you show up like that, people are just much more relaxed with you, and they feel free to show up as themselves as well. So that's why I love personal branding so much. Like the business connected, we can all have much deeper conversations.
Yeah, that value of connection coming back in. Definitely.
One of my top values, Whitney.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I am curious. So I know coming in, you were already doing this work, right? We've talked a little bit about your transformation and your easing that's happened in your personal and professional life. And I'm curious, how has your journey, your training with the Somatic school, like shifted the way you're working with others? So it sounds like there's been a big shift personally within you, but how has that shifted how you're working with your clients?
Oh my God, it's really changed a lot of things. So I I always get people to check in and how they feel in their bodies. That's the first thing that's really changed. So when a client comes and works with me, I'll do a settling. Like, okay, let's just land. Let's just, how are you feeling in your body today? What's going on? So I've really noticed a difference in depth of the coaching. It's very disarming when you do that. It's like, and because I'm comfortable with it, they're like, oh, okay. And I just feel like I get to a much more spacious and emotional connection with people more quickly. So that's one thing in my coaching work. And I also bring it a lot into my training as well. Like I talk a lot about the nervous system. I do a lot of physical work. So I do a lot of public speaking training and communication training. And it's transformed it, Whitney. It's transformed it, because when I used to do those sessions, I used to be more from, here's body language and this is how to use your body. Now I get people to feel into their bodies and have more awareness on the inside of what's bubbling up. So if you're going to do a speech, let's build a connection to what's going on in the body, and instead of trying to just do a big gesture to look more confident, let's settle our bodies, let's do some breathing. And yeah, I work in a very much, I feel that the work just takes people to a much deeper place more quickly, and it helps them connect with themselves. So I use it all the time, especially with public speaking coaching, because people just innately get anxious and scared, and either become bombastic and a bit over the top, or they shrink. So helping them to get awareness of that is really, really, really key. And just teaching them the simple practices that we learn on Somatic in the Somatic school, orientating. That's really, really key to helping people regulate. If you're going to go into a meeting, just take a moment to go for a walk in the park, do some breathing. So I teach all of those skills, and and the people in the business world love it. They love it. Yeah.
Yeah, sourcing what's nourishing and inspiring from our environment, especially in such a charged environment as it can feel walking into a meeting or walking into giving a talk, or there being hundreds of eyes on you, let alone more than that, or 10, or even just two sets of eyes on you. And yeah, leaning into the environment, it sounds like pairing that with the simplicity of showing up just as you are. So who
Yeah.
you are and as you are, right? The who
Yeah.
you are of your story and your brand, and the as you are kind of bringing the somatic piece, the present
Yeah.
moment.
It's exactly that, Whitney. It's the combination of learning, what do you care about, what do you stand for, and like feeling the emotion of that, because the most compelling speakers are the ones who really, they're sourced from a place of deep resonance within themselves, and then it's like you become for other people. I mean, when I saw Nathan talk the first time at the Somatic School, I was like, holy moly, who is he? I've got to work with Nathan. I was like, sign me up, because he's connected. He's so inspiring, because you can see he really believes in the work. And that's the most compelling type of communication, when we're sourced from our own inspiration, and then it bubbles up out of it. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, if you could leave the listeners with a mantra or a motto or even a question to ask themselves, what would that be?
So I would really ask the question, what lights you up the most in life? What lights you up? Because from that source of passion, that source of this is the starting point of discovering your brand. Like, what lights you up, and find stories around that. That for me is the source. What lights you up? Where do you feel the most lit up? Where you feel the most expanded? And find stories around that will connect you back to a place of where you get more clarity. So what lights you up is probably the question I would leave. And find stories, because stories are they're fun to find. It's like when we start to look at our life history and just go back to, for me, one of the stories that lit me up was when I was 18 years old, and someone gave me a microphone at the local BBC radio station and said, go out and take this story on. I was like, what? But it was so challenging, but that lit me up. This kind of big challenge lit me up. So go through your history and find little stories where you felt the most lit up, and start seeing what are the connections between those stories. That is what lights you up, Whitney?
Oh, I was going to ask you that question. Oh, I love this reversing of roles. It's really I knew it was going to happen before I walked into this remote
Jeez.
recording studio.
That's-
I knew it.
Oh.
What lights me up is just creating spaces for people to really feel seen and witnessed, and like they can show up as they are, vulnerable, authentic, and yeah, creating spaces where that is not only saying this is okay, you can be here, you're safe here, but actually emanating that out through presence and just creating the conditions that in an unspoken way people can embrace yeah, that level of authenticity, vulnerability, um yeah, and just selfhood.
It's so that's you as a coach, Whitney, and it's why you've been picked to do the podcast as a role. That same quality, what lights you up, you're using it here, which is beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? So we've captured through this conversation, I think, a lot of what lights you up, and your mention here of that microphone in your hand. But yeah, I that would terrify me. So I think that's very unique.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear, yeah, what lights you up?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. For me, the invigorating process of bringing someone's creativity out into the world, like, oh, that lights me up. Seeing over the years, I've been to album launches, book launches, I've seen people launch podcasts. I've seen people get their first agent and going along to their exhibition. It's like, for me, oh my God, that fills my whole body with tingles, because just seeing unique creative projects. Somebody I worked with opened an incredible store right down the street that I can go into every day, and it's so filled with love. That's what lights me up more than anything. Like I'm filling with tears as I think
Mm.
about work, because that is what I feel like I was destined to do. Yeah.
Mm. It
Yeah.
sounds like it. Thank you so much, Nikki. This has been, to reflect the word you just used back, that I loved. This has been such an invigorating conversation. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here. If you would like to follow Nikki, information on her website, social media links, that will all be in the show notes. But for now, signing off.
Thank you, Whitney.
Thank you, Nikki. That's our show, folks. I hope you found something nourishing, enjoyable, or inspiring in today's episode. Thank you for being here, and see you next time. In the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram at Radio Somanaut. You can also find out more about the Somatic School and our accredited diploma in body-oriented coaching at thesomaticschool.com, or follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. This is Whitney Dawn Pyles, encouraging you to stay present, stay curious, and stay connected.